My name is Jake Morrison, and I need to tell you what happened to me last summer. I've been carrying this story for months now, and I can't sleep properly anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. Every time I hear a car door slam outside, my heart starts racing. If you've ever felt like someone was watching you, if you've ever had that gut feeling that something was terribly wrong, then maybe you'll understand what I went through. I was 22, a junior at Oregon State University, majoring in computer science. Like most college students, I was always broke. Textbooks, rent, food, gas, money, it all added up faster than my part-time job at the campus bookstore could cover. So when my professor, Dr. Martinez, mentioned that his neighbor was looking for a house sitter for 2 weeks while they went on vacation, I jumped at the chance. Dr. Martinez had been my favorite instructor since freshman year. He taught advanced programming and always went out of his way to help struggling students. When he told me the job paid $800 for 2 weeks of just staying at the house, feeding a cat, and keeping an eye on things, it sounded too good to be true. The house belonged to a couple named Robert and Linda Chen. They were both in their 50s, successful professionals who had built a beautiful home in the hills about 20 minutes outside of Corvallis. Dr. Martinez explained that they were going on a European vacation, something they'd been planning for years, and they just wanted someone reliable to house sit while they were gone. I met the Chens on a Saturday afternoon in early June. Their house was stunning, a modern 2-story with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a valley. It sat on about 5 acres of property, surrounded by dense forest on 3 sides. The nearest neighbor was almost a mile away, which Robert Chen mentioned as both a blessing and something to be aware of. "It's very peaceful out here," Linda said as she showed me around, "but it can feel isolated, especially at night. Are you comfortable being alone?" I assured her I was. I'd grown up in a small town and spent plenty of time by myself. The isolation actually sounded appealing after living in cramped dorms and shared apartments for 3 years. The house itself was like something from a magazine. Open floor plan, granite countertops, a stone fireplace, and a master bedroom with a balcony overlooking the valley. There were security cameras at the front and back doors, motion sensor lights around the perimeter, and a state-of-the-art alarm system. "We've never had any problems out here," Robert explained, "but better safe than sorry. The alarm code is 4471, and here's the contact information for our security company if anything goes wrong." Their cat, Whiskers, was a fat orange tabby who seemed more interested in sleeping than anything else. Linda showed me where his food was, explained his feeding schedule, and pointed out his favorite hiding spots around the house. "He's very low maintenance," she said. "Just feed him twice a day and clean his litter box. He mostly sleeps in the sun by the living room windows." They also gave me a detailed list of instructions: when to water the plants, how to operate the sprinkler system, what to do if the power went out. They had thought of everything. Before they left, Robert handed me $500 in cash as a down payment, with the remaining $300 to be paid when they return. "There's only one thing," Linda said as they were loading their suitcases into their car. "We've been having some issues with a man who's been bothering us. His name is Dale Hoffman. He lives about 10 miles down the mountain, and he's been persistent about wanting to buy our property." Robert's jaw tightened. "We've told him no multiple times, but he keeps showing up, usually during the day, but sometimes in the evening. If he comes by while we're gone, just tell him we're not interested and that he needs to leave." "Is he dangerous?" I asked. "Not exactly," Linda said, but she didn't sound entirely convinced. "He's just very pushy and doesn't seem to understand boundaries. We've considered calling the police, but he hasn't technically done anything illegal. He just won't take no for an answer." They described Dale as a man in his 40s, tall and thin, with graying hair and a scruffy beard. He drove an old blue pickup truck with Oregon plates. Robert showed me a photo on his phone that he'd taken of Dale's truck from their security camera. "If he shows up, don't engage with him," Robert said. "Just tell him to leave and call us if he won't go. We'll handle it from there." I nodded and assured them I could handle the situation. How bad could it be? Some pushy real estate wannabe who couldn't take no for an answer. I'd dealt with worse working retail. The Chens left on a Sunday morning, and for the first few days, Everything was perfect. I settled into a routine of sleeping in, feeding Whiskers, doing some summer coursework online, and enjoying the peace and quiet. The house had a massive TV with every streaming service imaginable, a hot tub on the back deck, and a kitchen stocked with more food than I'd seen in months. I called my girlfriend, Sarah, every night to tell her about my temporary life of luxury. She was working an internship back in Portland and was jealous of my setup. "You're living like a rich person," she said during one of our calls. "Maybe you should just never leave." The isolation didn't bother me at all. In fact, I loved it. After years of being surrounded by people constantly, the silence was therapeutic. I could work on my programming projects without interruption, read books I'd been meaning to get to, and just relax in a way I hadn't been able to do in years. On Wednesday evening, around 7 p.m., I was making dinner when I heard a car coming up the long gravel driveway. The sound was distinctive because of how quiet everything else was. I looked out the kitchen window and saw an old blue pickup truck parking near the front of the house. My stomach dropped. Dale Hoffman. I watched as a tall, thin man got out of the truck. He was exactly as the Chens had described him, maybe 6'2", with graying hair that looked like it hadn't been combed in days and a patchy beard. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans that had seen better days. He walked up to the front door with a confident stride, like he owned the place. I heard him knock, 3 sharp raps that echoed through the house. I turned off the stove and walked to the front door, but I didn't open it. Instead, I spoke through the door. "The Chens aren't here," I said. "They're on vacation." "I know that," Dale replied. His voice was rough, like he smoked a pack a day. "That's why I'm here. I wanted to talk to whoever's watching the place. They said to tell you they're not interested in selling." I heard him chuckle. "Is that what they told you to say? Look, kid, I don't know what they've told you about me, but I'm not the bad guy here. I'm trying to help them by making them rich. I'm prepared to offer them twice what this place is worth. Cash deal, no inspections, no contingencies. They'd be crazy not to take it." They said no, multiple times. "Yeah, well, they don't understand the full situation. There are things happening in this area that they don't know about. Development plans, infrastructure projects. This land is going to be worth a fortune in 5 years." I didn't respond. The Chens had told me not to engage with him, and every instinct I had was telling me to end this conversation. "Look," Dale said, his voice taking on a more aggressive tone. "I drove all the way up here. The least you can do is open the door so we can talk like civilized people." "I'm not opening the door. The Chens said to tell you to leave." There was a long pause. Then I heard footsteps on the gravel, but they weren't moving away from the house. They were moving around it. I rushed to the living room window and saw Dale walking along the side of the house, peering into windows and examining the exterior. He stopped at the back deck and tested the handle on the sliding glass door. It was locked, but the fact that he tried it made my blood run cold. I grabbed my phone and called Robert Chen's number. It went straight to voicemail. "Mr. Chen, it's Jake. Dale Hoffman is here and he's walking around your house trying doors. I told him to leave, but he's not listening. I'm not sure what to do. Please call me back." I went back to the front window and saw Dale returning to his truck. I thought he was leaving, but instead he just sat there. He backed his truck up so it was facing the house and turned off the engine. Then he just sat there, staring at the house. I tried calling the Chens again. Still no answer. Dale sat in his truck for almost 2 hours. I watched him from various windows, trying to stay out of sight. He wasn't doing anything threatening exactly, but he also wasn't leaving. He was just sitting there, occasionally checking his phone, but mostly just staring at the house. Around 9 p.m., he finally started his truck and left. I watched his taillights disappear down the driveway and felt like I could breathe again. I called the Chens one more time and left another message explaining what had happened. Then I called Sarah. "That's really creepy," she said after I told her the story. "Did you think about calling the police?" "And tell them what? A guy knocked on the door and then sat in his truck? He didn't actually do anything illegal. He tried the back door, Jake. That's not normal behavior." She was right, but I didn't know what the police could do about it. Dale hadn't broken any laws, technically. He was just being a pushy creep. That night, I barely slept. Every little sound made me jump. The house settling, the wind in the trees, even Whiskers walking around downstairs. I kept the alarm system on and checked the security cameras on my phone every few minutes. The next morning, I felt silly for being so paranoid. Dale had left when I asked him to, eventually. Maybe he was just one of those aggressive salesman types who didn't know when to quit. I decided to put it out of my mind and enjoy the rest of my house-sitting gig. But around noon, I was working on my laptop in the living room when I saw a flash of blue through the trees. My heart started pounding before my brain even processed what I was seeing. It was Dale's truck, parked on the road about a quarter-mile down the mountain, just barely visible through the forest. I grabbed a pair of binoculars that the Chens kept on a shelf near the window and focused on the truck. Dale was sitting in the driver's seat, and he appeared to be looking at the house through his own binoculars. He was watching me. I immediately closed all the curtains and blinds in the house. Then I called the Chens again, but their phones went straight to voicemail. I tried to remember what country they were in, wondering about the time difference and whether they'd even be awake. Dale's truck stayed there for the entire afternoon. Every time I checked through a crack in the curtains, he was still there, just sitting, just watching. Around 4 p.m., I decided I needed to do something. This wasn't normal behavior, and I couldn't just hide in the house for the next 10 days waiting for the Chens to come home. I called the non-emergency police number for the county sheriff's office. "I'm house, sitting for some friends," I explained to the dispatcher, "and there's a man who's been harassing them about buying their property. He came by yesterday, and now he's parked on the road watching the house through binoculars." "Is he on private property?" the dispatcher asked. "No, he's on the public road." "And has he threatened you or tried to enter the property?" "Not exactly, but yesterday he walked around the house and tried the back door." "But he didn't actually try to break in?" "No, but, sir, if he's not on private property and hasn't made any threats or attempted to break in, there's not much we can do. We can send a deputy to talk to him if you'd like, but he has a right to park on a public road." I asked them to send someone anyway. About an hour later, a sheriff's deputy arrived and drove down to where Dale was parked. I watched through the binoculars as they talked for maybe 10 minutes. Then the deputy left, and Dale's truck stayed exactly where it was. My phone rang a few minutes later. "Is this Jake Morrison?" The voice was unfamiliar. "Yeah, who is this?" "This is Dale Hoffman. I think we need to talk." My blood turned to ice. "How did you get this number?" "That's not important. What's important is that you seem to have gotten the wrong impression about me. I'm not some crazy person. I'm a businessman trying to make a legitimate deal." "The Chens told you no." "Multiple times." "The Chens are making a mistake, a big one, and you're helping them make it by acting like I'm some kind of threat." "I didn't call the cops because I thought you were a threat. I called them because you're sitting on the road watching the house with binoculars. That's not normal business behavior." Dale laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You know what's not normal? Living in a house worth $2 million, while the rest of us struggle to get by. You know what's not normal? Turning down an offer that would set you up for life, just because you're too proud to admit you need the money. This isn't your house, and it's not your decision. Everything's for sale, kid. Everything and everyone. The Chens will figure that out eventually. Question is whether they figure it out the easy way or the hard way." The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, my hands shaking. There had been something in Dale's voice, a barely controlled anger that made my skin crawl. This wasn't just about a business deal anymore, if it ever had been. I tried calling the Chens again. This time, Linda answered. "Jake, is everything okay?" "Mrs. Chen, thank God. Dale Hoffman has been here. He came to the house yesterday, and now he's been sitting on the road all day watching the house. He somehow got my phone number and called me. I think you need to come home." There was a long pause. "Oh no, we were afraid this might happen. Jake, I'm so sorry we put you in this situation." "What situation? What's really going on here?" Another pause. "Dale's not just interested in buying our house. He's been trying to force us to sell. 3 months ago, our water well mysteriously dried up. The week after that, someone vandalized our car. Last month, we found dead animals on our property. My stomach dropped. You think Dale did those things? We can't prove it, but yes, we think he's trying to make our lives so miserable that we'll sell just to get away from him. Why didn't you tell me this before I agreed to house sit? Because we hoped he'd leave you alone while we were gone. We thought maybe if we weren't there, he'd give up for a few weeks. Well, he hasn't given up. He's escalating. I could hear Robert's voice in the background, and then Linda came back on the line. Jake, we're going to try to get an earlier flight home. In the meantime, is there somewhere else you can stay? Maybe you should leave the house until we get back. And just abandon your place? What if he breaks in? The house isn't worth your safety. We have insurance. I looked out through the curtains at Dale's truck, still parked in the same spot. I'll think about it, I said. But call me as soon as you know when you're coming home. That evening, Dale's truck finally left around sunset. I watched him drive away and felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. Maybe he was done for the day. Maybe he had a job or something that required him to be elsewhere. I made dinner and tried to relax, but every sound outside made me jump. I kept checking the security cameras on my phone, looking for any sign of movement around the property. Around 10 p.m., I was watching TV when I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. It was the distinct beep of the security system being disarmed. Someone had entered the alarm code. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the security camera app. The front door camera showed nothing, but when I switched to the back door camera, I saw Dale standing on the deck, pulling the sliding glass door open. He was inside the house. I ran upstairs to the master bedroom and locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. 911, what's your emergency? Someone just broke into the house I'm staying at. He's inside right now. Are you in immediate danger? Yes, I'm locked in a bedroom upstairs. He came in through the back door. Do you know this person? His name is Dale Hoffman. He's been harassing the homeowners about buying their property. We're dispatching units to your location now. Stay on the line with me. I could hear movement downstairs, footsteps on the hardwood floor, doors opening and closing. Dale was searching the house. He's looking for me, I whispered to the dispatcher. The units should be there in about 10 minutes. Is there anywhere in the room you can hide? I looked around the master bedroom. There was a walk-in closet and a bathroom, but both had doors that could be easily opened. The balcony had a door, but that was a 20-foot drop to the ground. The footsteps were getting closer. I could hear Dale on the stairs now, climbing toward the second floor. He's coming upstairs, I whispered. Stay as quiet as possible. Don't try to confront him. I heard Dale reach the top of the stairs. There were 3 bedrooms and a bathroom on the second floor. The master bedroom, where I was hiding, was at the end of the hall. I heard him opening doors, one by one. First the guest bedroom, then the bathroom, then the second guest bedroom. My door was next. The footsteps stopped right outside the master bedroom. I held my breath and pressed myself against the wall next to the door. The handle turned slowly. The door was locked, but that only stopped him for a moment. I heard him manipulate the lock somehow, and then the door swung open. Dale stepped into the room, and I got my first close look at him. Up close. He was even taller than I'd thought, maybe 6'4", with ropey muscles and hands that looked like they could crush bones. His eyes were bloodshot and had a wild quality that made my stomach clench. There you are, he said, his voice calm but menacing. We need to have a conversation. The police are on their way, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I know, I heard the sirens starting up in town. We've got maybe 5 minutes. He stepped closer, and I could smell him now. Cigarettes, body odor, and something else, something chemical and sharp. You called the Chens, didn't you? Told them I was bothering you. You broke into their house. Of course I called them. I didn't break in. I have the alarm code. That stopped me cold. How do you have the alarm code? Dale smiled, and it was the most unsettling expression I'd ever seen. Because I've been watching this place for months. I know everything about the Chens. I know their schedules, their habits, their weaknesses. I know which window Linda leaves cracked open at night. I know that Robert always forgets to lock the garage door. I know that they hide a spare key under the fake rock by the front steps. You've been stalking them. I've been doing my research. And now I know about you too, Jake Morrison. 22 years old, computer science major at Oregon State. Drives a 2018 Honda Civic, license plate 847 GRT. Lives in apartment 3B at Cedar Grove Apartments in Corvallis. Has a girlfriend named Sarah who works at Powell's Books in Portland. My blood turned to ice. He knew where I lived. He knew about Sarah. What do you want? I want you to deliver a message to the Chens. Tell them they have 1 week to accept my offer. If they don't, things are going to get very unpleasant for everyone involved. And if I don't deliver your message? Dale reached into his jacket and pulled out a knife. It wasn't huge, maybe a 4-inch blade, but it looked sharp and well-maintained. Then I'll have to find other ways to communicate with them. Maybe through Sarah, maybe through you. I could hear sirens now, getting closer. You need to leave, I said. The police will be here any minute. Yeah, they will. And when they get here, you're going to tell them that this was all a misunderstanding. That you thought you heard someone break in, but it was just the cat knocking something over. You're not going to mention me at all. Why would I do that? Dale smiled again and showed me his phone. On the screen was a photo of Sarah leaving her apartment building. Because if you don't, Sarah's going to have a very bad day tomorrow. The sirens were very close now. Dale put the knife away and headed for the balcony door. Remember what I said, Jake? 1 week. And not a word to the cops about our conversation. He opened the balcony door and climbed over the railing. I watched in amazement as he lowered himself down and dropped to the ground below. By the time the police cars pulled up the driveway, Dale was already disappearing into the forest. 2 deputies came to the door, and I let them in. My hands were still shaking, and I'm sure I looked terrified, but I told them exactly what Dale had instructed me to say. I thought I heard someone break in, but I think it was just the cat. I was probably just spooked because I'm not used to being alone in such an isolated place. The deputies were skeptical but professional. They searched the house and found no signs of forced entry. The alarm system showed no record of being disarmed and rearmed. To them, it looked like exactly what I'd told them, a jumpy college kid who'd panicked over nothing. After they left, I sat in the living room trying to process what had just happened. Dale had threatened Sarah. He knew where she lived, where she worked, probably where she went to school. And he'd made it clear that if I didn't cooperate, she was going to pay for it. I called Sarah's number, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried 3 more times with the same result. It was almost midnight, so she was probably asleep, but I couldn't shake the image of Dale's phone showing that photo of her. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, watching the security cameras and jumping at every sound. Every hour, I tried calling Sarah, but her phone remained off. Finally, around 6 a.m., she called me back. Jake, what's wrong? You called me like 10 times. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm at home. I turned my phone off because I was trying to sleep. What's going on? I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't risk it. Not with Dale's threat hanging over both of us. Nothing. I just had a nightmare and wanted to hear your voice. Are you sure you're okay? You sound really shaken up. I'm fine. Just missing you. We talked for a few more minutes, and I felt some relief knowing she was safe. But I also knew that Dale could get to her anytime he wanted. He demonstrated that he could break into houses, that he could get phone numbers and personal information, that he could move around undetected. The Chens called around noon. Jake, we got your message. Are you all right? What happened with the police last night? I wanted to tell them the truth, but I couldn't risk Sarah's safety. It was nothing. I thought I heard someone break in, but it was just the cat. I overreacted. Are you sure? Because we're trying to get an earlier flight home. We should be back by Tuesday instead of Sunday. That would be great, but don't cut your vacation short on my account. Everything's fine here. If you're sure, I'm sure. But I wasn't sure about anything. I spent the rest of the day researching Dale Hoffman online, trying to learn more about him. What I found was disturbing. Dale had a criminal record going back 20 years. Assault, harassment, stalking, trespassing. He'd served time in prison twice. Once for beating up a man who'd refused to sell him a motorcycle, and once for breaking into a woman's house after she'd rejected his romantic advances. He owned a small construction company that seemed to be perpetually on the verge of bankruptcy. His business had been sued multiple times for substandard work and failure to complete projects. His personal life was a mess of failed relationships and restraining orders. This wasn't just a pushy businessman. This was a dangerous man with a history of violence against people who didn't give him what he wanted. I also found something else that made my blood run cold. 3 years earlier, a couple in Southern Oregon had been forced to sell their ranch to Dale after a series of increasingly aggressive harassment tactics. Their stories sounded exactly like what the Chens were going through. Mysterious property damage, dead animals, threatening phone calls. Eventually, the couple had sold their land to Dale for a fraction of its value just to escape the harassment. Dale had done this before, and he'd gotten away with it. That evening, I was making dinner when I saw Dale's truck coming up the driveway again. But this time, he wasn't alone. There was another man in the passenger seat, someone I didn't recognize. My phone rang before Dale even got out of the truck. "Time for another chat," Dale said. "I'm not opening the door." "You don't have to. I brought some photos I think you'll want to see." Dale got out of the truck and walked up to the front window. He held up his phone so I could see the screen through the glass. It was a photo of Sarah's apartment building, taken from inside her apartment. Someone had been inside her home. My legs nearly gave out. "You bastard," I said into the phone. Now. No need for name-calling. Nobody got hurt, yet, but that could change very quickly if you don't start cooperating. What do you want? I want you to call the Chens and tell them you've changed your mind about house sitting. Tell them you need to leave early. Family emergency or something. Why? Because I need access to their house without you getting in the way. There are some things I need to take care of. What kind of things? That's not your concern. Your only concern should be keeping your girlfriend safe. I looked at the photo again. Dale's friend had not only broken into Sarah's apartment, he'd taken the time to photograph her belongings, her personal space. How do I know you won't hurt her anyway? You don't, but I can promise you that if you don't do exactly what I tell you, she's definitely going to get hurt. I closed my eyes and tried to think. If I left the house, Dale would have free access to do whatever he was planning, but if I stayed, Sarah was in immediate danger. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. Call the Chens before noon and tell them you're leaving. If you don't, Sarah's going to have some very unpleasant visitors. Dale ended the call and got back in his truck. As they drove away, I could see the other man looking back at the house and smiling. I called Sarah immediately. You need to leave your apartment right now, I said. What? Jake, what's going on? I can't explain everything, but you're in danger. Pack a bag and go stay with your sister or your parents. Don't go to work tomorrow. Jake, you're scaring me. I'm scared too. Please, just trust me. Leave your apartment and don't go back until I tell you it's safe. Is this about that guy who's been bothering the people you're house-sitting for? I hadn't told her about Dale specifically, but she was smart enough to put the pieces together. Yes, he's escalating and he's using you to get to me. Please, just leave. I'll explain everything later. To her credit, Sarah didn't argue. She could hear the terror in my voice, and she trusted me enough to act on it. Okay, I'll pack a bag and drive to my sister's place in Salem. But Jake, you need to call the police. I will, as soon as you're safe. Promise me. I promise. After Sarah left Portland, I spent the longest night of my life trying to figure out what to do. Dale had backed me into a corner. If I called the police, he'd know, and Sarah would pay for it. If I didn't call the police, he'd have free rein to do whatever he was planning at the Chen's house. Around 3 a.m., I made a decision. I couldn't protect Sarah from Dale indefinitely, and I couldn't abandon the Chens either. I was going to have to take a risk. I called the FBI field office in Portland and asked to speak to someone about stalking and interstate threats. After being transferred several times, I finally reached an agent named Detective Morrison who specialized in stalking cases. I told her everything: Dale's history, his threats, the photo of Sarah's apartment, the pattern of harassment against multiple victims. I explained that Dale was planning something for the next day and that I was being coerced into abandoning my post as house sitter. "This sounds like a clear case of criminal stalking and extortion," Detective Morrison said. "But we need to be careful about how we handle it. If this guy is as dangerous as you say, we don't want to provoke him into hurting your girlfriend or the homeowners. What do you suggest?" "I'm going to coordinate with the local sheriff's office to set up surveillance on both locations. We'll have people watching your girlfriend and people watching the house where you're staying. When Dale makes his move, we'll be ready." "What about me? Do I leave like he wants, or do I stay?" "You stay. If you leave, we lose our opportunity to catch him in the act. But Jake, I want you to understand that this is going to be dangerous. If Dale realizes we're onto him, there's no telling how he might react." "I understand. There's one more thing. We're going to need you to wear a wire. If Dale contacts you again, we need to record the conversation. His threats against your girlfriend constitute federal crimes, but we need evidence that will hold up in court." The next morning, Detective Morrison and 2 other agents came to the house. They fitted me with a small recording device and explained how it worked. They also showed me photos of the surveillance teams that would be positioned around the property. "Dale won't be able to see them," Detective Morrison assured me, "but they'll be close enough to intervene if things go bad." At exactly noon, my phone rang. It was Dale. "Time's up, college boy. Did you call the Chens?" "Not yet," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, you better hurry up. My friend is sitting outside Sarah's sister's house in Salem right now. Cute little place on Maple Street." My blood ran cold. Somehow, Dale had tracked Sarah to her sister's house. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Check your text messages." A few seconds later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Sarah walking up to a house I didn't recognize, but the street sign in the background clearly said Maple Street. "Call the Chens now, or Sarah and her sister are both going to have a very bad day." I had no choice. With the FBI agents listening through my wire, I called Linda Chen. "Mrs. Chen, I'm really sorry, but I need to leave early. My mom is in the hospital and I need to get home right away." "Oh my goodness, Jake. Of course. Is she going to be okay?" "I don't know yet. I'm leaving this afternoon. Don't worry about the house. We'll figure something out. Just take care of your family." I ended the call and immediately felt sick to my stomach. I just lied to people who trusted me and potentially put them at risk. "Good boy," Dale said through the phone. "Pack your stuff and get out. I want you gone by 2 p.m. And then you'll leave Sarah alone? As long as you keep your mouth shut about our business, your girlfriend will be fine." The line went dead. Detective Morrison looked at me with sympathy. "I know that was hard, but you did the right thing. We got everything on tape. What happens now?" "Now we wait. Dale's going to come to the house, probably tonight. And when he does, we'll be ready for him." I packed my things slowly, dragging out the process as long as possible. The surveillance teams were already in position, hidden in the forest around the property. Detective Morrison assured me that they had eyes on every approach to the house. At 2 p.m. exactly, I loaded my car and drove away from the Chen's house, but I didn't go far. Detective Morrison had arranged for me to stay at a motel about 5 miles away, close enough to monitor the situation but far enough away to keep me safe. That evening, I sat in my motel room watching live footage from the Chen security cameras on my laptop. Detective Morrison was with me, along with Agent Rodriguez from the local FBI field office. We had communications with all the surveillance teams positioned around the property. At 8:47 p.m., Dale's blue pickup truck appeared on the road leading up to the house, but he didn't drive up the driveway like before. Instead, he parked about a quarter mile away and walked through the forest, approaching the house from the back. "Subject is on foot, approaching from the southeast," came the voice over the radio. Through the security cameras, we watched Dale emerge from the trees and approach the back deck. He was carrying a large duffel bag and wearing all black clothing. This wasn't a casual visit. "All units, hold position," Detective Morrison said into her radio. "Let's see what he's planning." Dale pulled out a set of lockpicks and went to work on the back door. It took him less than 2 minutes to get inside. The alarm system should have triggered, but somehow he disabled it. "How did he do that?" I asked. "He's done this before," Detective Morrison replied grimly. "This guy's a professional." Once inside, Dale moved through the house with purpose. He wasn't ransacking the place or looking for valuables. He was doing something specific. Through the interior cameras, we watched him go to the kitchen and pull items out of his duffel bag. "What is that?" Agent Rodriguez asked, leaning closer to the screen. It looked like Dale was setting up some kind of equipment in the kitchen, small devices that he placed in various locations throughout the room. Then he moved to the living room and did the same thing. "Those look like listening devices," Detective Morrison said. "He's bugging the house." "Why would he do that?" "Information. He wants to hear what the Chens are saying when they get home. Their plans, their fears, their conversations with lawyers or police. Knowledge is power in a stalking situation." Dale spent almost an hour inside the house, methodically placing devices in every room. He also did something to the electrical panel in the basement and made some kind of modification to the water heater. "He's sabotaging their utilities," Agent Rodriguez observed. "Classic harassment technique. Make their life miserable until they give up and sell." Finally, Dale finished whatever he was doing and headed back toward the door. But instead of leaving immediately, he stopped in the living room and pulled out his phone. My phone rang. "Answer it," Detective Morrison said. "Keep him talking." "Jake," Dale's voice came through clearly, "I hope you're enjoying your time away from the house. I did what you asked. I left." "Yes, you did. And now I'm taking care of some business. By the time the Chens get home tomorrow, they're going to find that their beautiful house isn't quite as comfortable as they remember." "What did you do?" "Nothing permanent. Yet. But they're going to start having problems. Serious problems. And when they do, they're going to realize that selling to me is their only option." Through the camera, I watched Dale walk through the house as he talked, admiring his handiwork. "You know what's funny?" Dale continued. "They think they're so smart going to Europe to get away from me, but they can't run forever. And when they come back, they're going to find that their problems have gotten much worse. They'll call the police. And tell them what? That their house has mechanical problems? That they're hearing strange noises? The police can't do anything about bad plumbing or faulty wiring." Dale laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. "But I'm a reasonable man, Jake. When the Chens start having these problems, you're going to call them and suggest that maybe they should reconsider my offer. Tell them that maybe it's not worth the hassle of dealing with all these issues, that maybe they should just sell and move somewhere easier. And if I don't? Well, let's just say that Sarah looks very pretty when she's sleeping. My friend got some lovely photos of her at her sister's house last night." My blood turned to ice. "You said you'd leave her alone if I cooperated." "I said I'd leave her alone as long as you keep cooperating. This isn't a one-time thing, Jake. You're working for me now. And you're going to keep working for me until the Chens sign those papers." "I won't do it." "Yes, you will. Because if you don't, Sarah's going to disappear. And when the police find her body, it's going to look like a random crime. Wrong place, wrong time. Very tragic." The line went dead. Detective Morrison was already on her radio. "All units, move in now. Suspect is still inside the house." I watched through the security cameras as tactical officers emerged from the forest and surrounded the house. Dale must have seen them through the windows because he suddenly dropped his phone and ran toward the back door. But the officers were ready for him. As soon as he stepped onto the back deck, 3 agents tackled him to the ground. He struggled and cursed, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. "Dale Hoffman, you're under arrest for stalking, extortion, breaking and entering and making terroristic threats." Detective Morrison's voice came through the radio. I watched them handcuff Dale and lead him away from the house, but my relief was short-lived. "What about his friend?" I asked. "The one who's been watching Sarah?" Detective Morrison was already on the phone with the Salem Police Department. "We need immediate protection for Sarah Morrison and her sister at 1247 Maple Street. Armed and dangerous suspect may be in the area. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls and debriefings. The Salem police found Dale's accomplice, a career criminal named Tommy Vance, parked outside Sarah's sister's house with a trunk full of weapons and zip ties. He was arrested without incident. Sarah was safe, but shaken. When I finally got to talk to her on the phone, she broke down crying. "I was so scared, Jake. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew it was bad." "It's over now," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. The FBI found evidence linking Dale to at least 6 other cases of property harassment and coercion across Oregon and Northern California. In each case, he'd used the same tactics: sabotage, surveillance, and threats against family members to force people to sell their property at below-market prices. But Dale's operation was more sophisticated than anyone had realized. When they searched his property, they found a workshop where he manufactured listening devices and other surveillance equipment. They also found detailed files on dozens of potential targets, including the Chens, complete with property assessments, financial records, and personal information about family members. Dale had been planning to expand his operation, targeting wealthy property owners throughout the Pacific Northwest. The Chens weren't just random victims, they were part of a larger criminal enterprise. The Chens flew home immediately when they learned what had happened. Linda cried when she saw me, apologizing over and over for putting me in danger. "We had no idea it was this serious," Robert said. "We thought he was just a pushy businessman. If we'd known he was this dangerous, we never would have asked you to house sit." "It's not your fault," I said. "Dale fooled a lot of people." The FBI swept the house and found 17 listening devices and multiple sabotage attempts. Dale had loosened gas fittings, damaged electrical connections, and introduced a slow-acting chemical into the water system that would have made the family sick over time. "If you hadn't been here," Detective Morrison told the Chens, "you would have come home to a house that was literally trying to kill you, and you probably would have blamed it on old wiring or bad luck." Dale Hoffman was ultimately convicted on federal charges of stalking, extortion, and racketeering. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Tommy Vance got 8 years for his role in the conspiracy. But the experience changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I couldn't go back to the carefree college student I'd been before. Every unexpected knock at the door made my heart race. Every unfamiliar car parked on my street caught my attention. I started checking locks obsessively and looking over my shoulder constantly. Sarah and I stayed together, but the trauma affected our relationship too. She had nightmares for months about strangers breaking into her apartment. We both started seeing therapists, which helped, but some scars don't completely heal. I never house sat again. The easy money wasn't worth the risk, and I couldn't shake the feeling that accepting jobs from strangers was inviting danger into my life. The worst part was learning how many other victims Dale had claimed over the years. The FBI estimated that he'd forced at least 12 families to sell their properties using similar tactics. Most of them never realized they'd been deliberately targeted. They just thought they'd had a run of bad luck that made staying in their homes impossible. One couple in Ashland had sold their dream house after their well was poisoned and their dog was killed. An elderly man in Medford had given up his family ranch after a series of suspicious accidents nearly burned down his barn. A young family in Eugene had sold their first home after their baby kept getting sick from mysterious chemical exposure. Dale hadn't just been stealing property, he'd been destroying lives. And he'd been getting away with it for years because his methods were so subtle and his victims never connected their individual experiences to a larger pattern. The Chens decided to sell their house after all, not to Dale, but on the open market. They said the place would never feel safe again, knowing what Dale had planned for them. They moved to a condo in town where they felt more secure. "It's not just about Dale," Linda explained when they told me their decision. "It's about knowing that there are people out there who see everything you've worked for, everything you love, as something they can just take. I can't live with that feeling." I understood. The experience had taught me that safety is an illusion, that predators walk among us every day, looking for opportunities to exploit our trust and our vulnerabilities. But it also taught me something else. When evil people try to intimidate and control others, sometimes ordinary people have to stand up and fight back. If I hadn't been willing to work with the FBI, Dale would still be out there terrorizing families and destroying lives. A year later, I received a letter from one of Dale's previous victims, the elderly man who'd lost his ranch in Medford. He'd read about Dale's arrest in the newspaper and realized what had really happened to him. "I thought I was cursed," he wrote. "I thought God was punishing me for something I'd done wrong. I gave up everything and moved into a tiny apartment in town, convinced that I was a failure. Now I know it wasn't my fault. I know I was the victim of a criminal, not a cosmic punishment. Thank you for having the courage to stop him. You saved other families from going through what I went through." That letter meant more to me than any paycheck or grade or achievement I'd ever receive, because it reminded me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to be intimidated by people who want to hurt others. Dale is scheduled for release in 2037. I'll be 37 years old then, probably married with kids of my own. Part of me wonders if he'll try to find me when he gets out, if he'll blame me for ruining his criminal enterprise. But I'm not the same scared college kid who answered his phone call 2 years ago. I've learned that bullies and predators rely on fear and isolation to control their victims. They count on people being too scared or too confused to fight back. They count on us being alone. But we don't have to be alone. There are good people in the world. People like Detective Morrison and the FBI agents who risked their lives to stop Dale. There are people like Sarah, who trusted me enough to leave her apartment in the middle of the night based on nothing but the terror in my voice. And there are people like the Chens, who could have blamed me for the nightmare their vacation became, but instead thanked me for helping to stop a dangerous criminal. If Dale does come looking for me when he gets out of prison, he'll find that I'm not the easy target I once was. I've learned to trust my instincts, to ask for help when I need it, and to stand up to people who try to use fear as a weapon. Most importantly, I've learned that the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding under the bed or lurking in dark alleys. They're the ones who walk among us in broad daylight, the ones who shake our hands and smile at us while planning to destroy our lives. They're the Dale Hoffmans of the world, the people who see other human beings as obstacles to be removed or resources to be exploited. They're the people who believe that everything and everyone has a price, and that fear and violence are acceptable tools for getting what they want. But here's what I've learned about people like Dale Hoffman. They're cowards. They prey on isolated victims because they know they can't win in a fair fight. They rely on secrecy and intimidation because they know that their methods can't survive exposure to sunlight. When you shine a light on what they're doing, when you refuse to be intimidated, when you reach out for help instead of suffering in silence, they lose their power over you. And that's why I'm telling you this story. Because if you're ever in a situation like mine, if someone is trying to control you through fear or threats, you need to know that you're not powerless. You're not alone. There are people who will help you if you're brave enough to ask for help. There are laws that will protect you if you're willing to stand up and fight. And there are other people out there who have survived similar experiences, people who understand what you're going through and want to help you survive it too. My name is Jake Morrison, and I survived Dale Hoffman, not because I was brave or strong or special, but because I refused to let fear paralyze me when it mattered most. And if you ever find yourself face to face with your own Dale Hoffman, I hope you'll remember my story and know that you can survive too.